Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion of energy policy and its impact on the poor. Now, joining me here in Denver, Nigel Innes from the Congress of Racial Equality and Carl Pope, Executive Director of the Sierra Club. Now, before the break, we were looking at the various differences towards alternative energies. We've got two phone calls on the line I want to take back to back. First of all, let's get Ghana on the line. Mackenzie, your question, please.
Yep.
Go ahead, please.
Your panelists were talking about a comprehensive approach on how to deal with the energy crisis confronting the whole world. But what is this particular comprehensive approach your panelists are talking about out here? Could it be a little bit clear for us?
Okay.
Because there should be specific targets on it.
Okay, Mackenzie, thank you. Let's also get on Charlie from Chicago, and let's get Charlie's question. Charlie, can you hear us? What would you like to ask?
Yes, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Hi. Go ahead, Charlie.
I'd like to talk about the lack of research into non-hydrocarbon resources. At the end of World War II, the Germans explored hydrogen peroxide on submarines. It was like a super hydrogen peroxide. And we haven't really thoroughly explored non-hydrocarbon resources. The hydrocarbon resources are basically a combination of hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. And we really haven't looked into oxygen resources. And I think we should look out of the box for solutions to our need to drive cars and planes.
Okay. Charlie, I'm going to put these questions to our panelists, and actually, Nigel Innes, I'm going to start with you also with an email question that we got that had come in from Kentucky here in the USA, and it was from Zahira, who says, how possible is alternative energy considering corporations are limiting the success of these efforts in order to protect their profits? So the three elements we have here from our viewers are, first of all, the idea of what is a more comprehensive approach. Secondly, the issue of the research into the alternative energies that Charlie was talking about, and then also the idea of what is obstructing that research.
Well, first of all, the comprehensive approach is saying that there is no artificial, which unfortunately I think many within the environmental movement often do, which is pit one type of energy. There's good energy and there's bad energy. No. All energy is good energy, and we ought to explore it and exploit it. Look at Brazil right now, which Carl and I applaud for their moving to alternative fuels. They just made a discovery of oil in Jupiter fields that may give them more reserves than ExxonMobil has around the world. And they're exploiting it, and they're using it to assure their economic and their energy security. They have a comprehensive approach, and that's what we're saying. We're saying, forget the artificial, saying big bad oil companies, and we ought to rush to alternatives. We see the rush to alternatives in terms of ethanol, the impact that it could potentially have on food prices. We see riots all over the world because of rising food prices, because of the rush to alternative fuels vis-a-vis ethanol. So the bottom line is we have to do it all. And in terms of the obstruction, look, the beauty of a free market economy is that whereas there may be incentive for some companies and some industries to not explore alternative fuels, there are many incentives for people like T-Bone Pickens to explore wind power and for other corporations and individuals and entrepreneurs to explore alternative fuels. But the key thing is we have to do it all across the board.
Right. Carl Pope, I want you to respond to that, but also with an email that we got in that had come in, actually not an email, this is actually a response from two delegates here that we spoke to. One actually came in from, I think it was Oregon, and the first person actually came in from Georgia. And then let's listen to what they had to say in terms of their views on this, and then let's get your response. So let's see if we can hear that.
My question is, with energy being such a global issue, I don't believe that we can solve it just by nation. It has to take on a global perspective. I'd love to see what the panel has to say about remedies from a global perspective to solve our energy problem.
My question for Carl is, in the 70s when we were working on energy policy, we implemented a number of tax credits. Given the economic situation right now, how are we going to fund what we euphemistically call alternative energy for the future?
So there, Carl, they're asking you specifically, what happens about funding? How can you fund alternative energy?
The world needs to recognize that this is the biggest challenge facing the planet. And we need to recognize that in Ghana, for example, there are huge opportunities to develop biofuels. In Morocco, the opportunity is solar power. In other parts of the world, it may be wind. There's a lot of wind in the mountains in South America. Every nation needs to be given the opportunity to develop their own energy solutions, but we need to recognize no energy source is intrinsically bad, but many energy sources are hurting people. People in Beijing can barely breathe because of air pollution. That's a bad energy source to burn coal the way they're burning it in Beijing. And people in the Niger Delta are dying from the way oil is being extracted. That makes oil in the Niger Delta a bad energy source.
Let me ask you, I mean, ironically, we've got Are You Going My Way playing, Lenny Kravitz song behind us, and the irony is a lot of Americans saying, you can't be going my way because you can't afford the fuel. So let me put to both of you and start with you, Nigel. How do you propose lowering the cost of fuel at the pump, which is hurting the voting American public? They want to know how they can afford to drive. What would you propose as an immediate impact?
We have to immediately, we saw that when President Bush removed the executive order on continental shelf drilling, immediately there was an impact on the stock market because people believed for the first time America was going to get serious about having a comprehensive approach to energy solutions and an energy future. I think it's a question of drilling anywhere we can to find oil and natural gas. It is having incentives for alternatives, but recognizing that we're going to need the bridge of fossil fuels to get to that alternative future. It's exploring nuclear power, which I don't believe Carl supports, but we are very much in favor of. It's promoting clean technologies, if you will, clean coal, if you will. It's across the board. And you know what? Someone said it's almost like a basketball game. At the beginning of a basketball game, you throw up the ball and you say, may the best man win, may the tallest person hit it, may the best energy win. Jump ball.
Carl, I know you're against the idea of just going all out drilling, aren't you?
Well, my answer is we're drilling in lots of places, and last week we offered a bunch of leases to the oil industry. They didn't bid on them. I've talked to T. Boone Pickens. He says there's really not meaningful amounts of oil and gas off our coast. The reality is we can't solve this problem with a 20th century solution. We need a 21st century solution, and yes, oil and gas will be part of it.
Let me ask you what you propose to alleviate the high fuel prices at the pump for the Americans.
The first thing we need to do is to say to the auto industry, put the technology you have to make a car go twice as far on a gallon of gas as fast as you can. The big thing that will bring down the price is if America stops consuming too much of the world's oil. We have 5% of the population. We use 25% of the world's oil. If we had efficient vehicles, if you need to drive a truck, if you're a plumber and you need a truck and you're driving 100,000 miles in a year and you want a fuel-efficient truck, good luck. Detroit won't give you one. We need to give consumers real choice so we can get ourselves away from fossil fuels and onto the future.
It's ironic that my friend Carl here says that offshore, that has no meaning, and T. Boone Pickens doesn't believe that it's going to amount to anything because the Chinese and the Cubans right now are discussing potentially drilling off the Florida Straits, which also happens to be off of our country, off of Florida. And there's something suicidal with our energy policy that will allow the Chinese and the Cubans to drill in our waters when environmental policy prevents
well,
us
heavens,
from doing
I
it.
have to point out that the reason American oil companies can't drill in Cuba is because the Bush administration won't let them.
No, not in Cuba. I'm talking,
No,
I'm
the
talking
Bush
50
administration.
miles
No,
off
they're
the shore
drilling
of
in-
Florida.
they're drilling
Not in
in Cuban
Cuba.
waters.
We don't want to go to Cuba to drill, just off of our own shore. Thank you, Carl.
Well, listen, gentlemen, we pretty much reached the end of our show. I thank you very much. We sort of ended there as we're going out with Are You Going My Way, which is kind of ironic since if you're going to be going our way with American fuel prices, it's more than $4 a gallon, more than double that, of course, in Europe. Now, don't forget, you can be with us tomorrow as well when we continue our coverage of the Democratic Convention at our special live time of 0030 GMT. We'll ask a group of American voters what role foreign policy plays in their decision for president. And next week, our team heads to the Republican Convention in St. Paul, Minnesota for more of our expanding look at the issues in the upcoming U.S. elections and how they'll impact the rest of the world. We'll see you next time.